Hello, everybody, and welcome to the podcast Creatives Who Thrive. I'm your host, Deven Berryhill. This is the show where we share stories from artists who make money to make more art. In other words, we interview people that are out there doing it in the real world, making their creative works accessible and are able to monetize them in a way that's healthy and brings longevity, both financially and personally. So we're glad you're here. Be sure to subscribe to the Creatives Who Thrive YouTube channel here and hit the little bell. But today I'm really excited about this next guest. In fact, I'm very close to this person. This person actually brought me into the world. That's my mom, Gene Berryhill. And she is someone who I've patterned my creative life after. She is a graphic designer. She is a musician. She is a photographer, historian. She has multiple degrees, including a PhD in art history. She is a Fulbright Scholar, has traveled the world from Australia to the Middle East. And I'm really excited to have her on the program today. But first, I want to tell you about a special guitar amplifier company called Risen Guitar Amps. There was a guy named Bob Rizzi who developed Risen amplifiers back in the 1960s. But before that, he worked for a guy named Leo Fender in Fullerton, California. Leo, along with Bob, George Fullerton, and many others, developed some of the more classic amps that we know today. When Leo Fender sold Fender guitars and amplifiers to CBS, Bob went to go work for Rickenbacker. He developed amps that even Led Zeppelin used on their first tour here in the United States. There's been many musicians that have played on the Risen amplifiers, including Joe Walsh, Slash from Guns N' Roses, Glenn Campbell, and now the Tourmaliners. We're excited that we're going to be coming out with this year in 2021 into 2022, the new Surfmaster. And check out their website. Go to risenamplifiers.com. Without further ado, please welcome my mom, Gene Berryhill. Well, hey, everybody, this is Deven Berryhill with Creatives Who Thrive. It's the podcast / vlog who tells stories from artists who make money to make more art. And so today, my very special guest is someone I know quite well who actually brought me into the world, and that's Gene Berryhill, my mom, Gene. Please welcome Gene to the show. Welcome, Mom.
Hi, everyone. Great to see you.
Well, I'll tell you that I was a little inspired by Dave Grohl on this one. He has a new show coming out with his mom. I don't know if you saw that. Dave's mom is actually interviewing other moms of famous stars and musicians.
Yeah.
So when I saw that, I thought, well, it's cool to have Mom come on the show. So I would have had you anyway, but welcome.
Thank you. I love Dave Grohl. Yeah, I think he's really funny.
He is.
Even his latest video, he went back to his first video of that weird, nerdy character. And, he switches back and forth from that to his current band playing, which I think is brilliant.
Yeah. Well, today, many of you may or may not know, but my mom is actually a creative, and she has worked, I've watched her my entire life be a creative person in the arts. And I'm going to have her tell a story, but basically someone who's been very successful, a Fulbright Scholar, has a doctorate in art history and archaeological digger, photographer, bass player in a band, you name it, she's done it. She's traveled the world, been to Australia, been to Europe many times with the Fulbright Commission. Pretty much been there, done that, seen a lot. Has also been an educator at the university level for many, many years, and I'll have her talk about that. But so before we get to all that, Mom, tell everybody kind of, when did you first discover you were a creative and how'd that happen?
I was 3 years old, and I just loved to draw. And so we always lived in an area with a lot of nature. And so I like to draw natural things, flowers and bunny rabbits and animals and trees. And there are a few houses and some people thrown in there. But I draw these really detailed things with my crayons and, as a little kid. But that, and my parents had an old upright piano, and they allowed me to pound away on that thing and explore tones and sounds. And so I ended up starting to write a bunch of little songs. So that was a big part of it. Let's see, what else could I say? Oh, my parents were big time country music fans and would take us all to something called Town Hall Party. And all the big stars from country music, like from Nashville and Texas and Alabama and Mississippi, all these places, would come to play. And there was a young boy and girl, they were brothers and sisters, and they were a duo, and they were real good. And I was very inspired. I loved the girl's outfits, and that she was just really had stage presence, and she could play a guitar, and she just was strong. And that really impressed me, that someone that small could be a professional creative.
Wasn't that the Collins kids?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Quite remarkable. If you look that up on YouTube, the Collins kids, the boy played a guitar. He's pretty fast on that thing too.
He was very good.
So, but you grew up and you went to high school. I remember you telling me stories about your art teacher. Tell me about that process of getting into being educated though, as an artist.
I had a great art teacher. He didn't give us a lot of direction, but he gave us a lot of freedom. And I was a person who needed a lot of freedom. He'd give us some guidance and, plans on what to do and some instruction, but he was a real funny guy. He lived in LA, but drove to Glendora, and just a real jokester. He had this huge, event coffee pot in his back room. So he drank about 20 cups of coffee a day. So he was, like this, but he was a great guy. And he really inspired me that I could be an artist. And he didn't think my little weird ways and thoughts and stuff were strange. He thought, that I could do something, and tried to get me into college like a year early. Mm-hmm. I'd earned enough, units to graduate my junior year, but that wasn't going to work out because my parents were concerned about me starting an adult professional life too young, and had an offer to go to Florence to study for 6 weeks, and they were concerned about that. But they were not, they enjoyed arts, but they really weren't planning on their kids becoming professional artists. So that got put on hold.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Our family, you'd moved us to Seal Beach, California, which is a little beach town south of LA, Long Beach area. And you ended up going to Long Beach State, and you met, what was his name? Alan, and some of those people that helped you there and at UCLA as well, right?
Yeah, Alan Cole was a teacher, and I was a fine artist for the first 2 years and studied all of those foundations, which was really good. And I don't know, by my junior year, I was kind of losing interest, and it might have had something to do with some of the teachers. It was a hard school, really hard school. 60 hours a week of working on your art was not unusual. And it was a tough school. It was hard to get into, but once, if you could graduate, if you could live through it, you pretty much knew how to do anything in art because they covered the broad spectrum. You just didn't go in like art center and, oh, I'm going to be a car designer or something like that. You learned everything. You learned how to make jewelry. You learned how to weave. You learned how to illustrate. You learned how to sculpt. I learned how to weld, and actually did some welding jobs later, but a little heavy for my frame, so I gave that up. But
So after graduating from Long Beach State, you were able to enter into your master's degree.
Yeah.
Where was that?
That was California State University in Los Angeles.
Okay.
And there I studied photography and graphics and got to know a professor from Russia who spoke 14 languages. And for some reason, I was able to pick up on his accent. And other students were having a hard time. I know my first semester with him, it was difficult because his accent was so thick. And so everybody else was just, lost. Well, somehow I got an A in the class. So he offered me a graduate assistantship because by then I could understand what he was saying. And I think that comes from kind of a sensitive ear from music training in my background that I was able to work that out. And he helped me tremendously. He pushed me toward art, design, history, because I was studying graphics at that point, and mainly because I was getting offered jobs to do that after I'd worked at UCLA as an illustrator with Alan Cole. And so that was also during that time, that was also when I was offered my first teaching job at Glendale Community College at night, part-time. So that was the beginning of that.
Before we get into your PhD, going back on the musical side too, growing up, you played violin, right?
Yes, I started playing in orchestra when I was 8 years old and did violin for several years. I had to practice 7 days a week, so I kind of, ended up hating it. But it was such a good experience looking back because a violin has no frets and you really have to fine tune your ear. And I learned about tones. I learned how to blend instruments with other people. And I learned how to get along with different kinds of, creatives as well, having to play in a large group and make it come together and sound good. So,
yeah, I find it interesting in different interviews I've done for this podcast, how many people are multidisciplinary. They'll be a graphic designer, but they'll also play bass in a jazz group, or they're a photographer, but they're also a writer. It seems to kind of ooze out of who they are. And another discovery, and I think you would agree, and I found in my own life is true creatives can't not create. It's just what you do. I mean, it's how you fit in this world. It's how you relate with the world and people around you, and they know you as a creative in some form. And for, obviously watching you my whole life, I've watched you develop through the years and go through different educational processes. And also on your professional side, I remember, I think I was probably in grade school, you started doing fine art for work, or graphic design, actually. Tell me about that. How kind of while you were going to school, like you said, you started picking up side jobs and doing commission work. Tell us about that a little bit.
While I was at Long Beach State, as I said before, I was offered a grant to paint a large mural for the biology department. So I did that. And that led to me doing exhibits for a new museum that was being opened up in San Pedro. And I got to work with Frank Gehry, the famous architect worldwide. And I learned a lot there. Those exhibits are probably still there, but I haven't, every now and then a friend will go and go to that museum and they go, oh, we were surprised to see that your name was on something. Yes, so it just grew from there to working at UCLA. And then I went out into business for myself after working for a year full time. And so I opened up a studio business in our home, as you remember.
Nope.
I
remember I think maybe when I was in junior high or high school, you were working for some publications as well, like Shape Magazine and such. You were doing illustrations, a lot of scientific illustrations. What was that about?
Well, for Shape Magazine, I did a number of issues, but I was airbrushing at that time, which was the big deal in sort of a painting and graphics environment. So you were illustrating, but you're also painting by using an airbrush, which gave a beautiful blended effect. And so at that time, I was working for all kinds of people as a freelancer. I started a business called Illustrated Science, but so I was doing photography and illustration and what else? I was working for attorneys who were doing presentations during, legal court battles. And what else? I worked for hospitals. I worked for research investigators that wanted their scientific or biological or medical research illustrated, or even to illustrate a surgery, since I had the stomach for it.
Yeah. Well, one of the things I think that a lot of people want to know is, how did you transition from kind of being the student artist? You had a mentor in high school, you had a mentor at Long Beach, and then in state, and then into UCLA, and then you kind of started going off on your own. And for a lot of people, especially young people, they're looking to maybe have a family and buy a house someday and have kind of a professional life that would financially they could live off of that. How was that transition for you?
Well, through my master's and PhD degrees, I started getting a lot of offers because my art just started getting out in the public. I was doing presentations. Anytime somebody had asked me to do a presentation through an organization, that's one thing I've always done, is networked and joined organizations in my field. And that is really important because you make lifetime friendships and colleagues that you're going to need in your future. I mean, I still work directly with a Biola University colleague. I taught there for 10 years. We met over doing a small grant there, and that worked into my first Fulbright grant. Writing grants is a major issue that I think most artists and creatives miss, because there's a lot of money out there and nobody goes for it. For one thing, I never thought that I would be qualified, because I was always told, well, you've got to be this huge intellectual.
What kind of grants are you talking about? Like government grants, like from the National Endowment of the Arts? What kind of grants?
Well, I did get a National Endowment for the Humanities. I was a co-recipient with this colleague at Biola, who I still keep in touch with, because we still keep, kind of helping each other out. When somebody needs a reference to get to the next level where they're going, we always, give each other good, strong references. So it's important to protect your reputation so that when you give a reference for someone, it means something.
Yeah.
And so I can't stress enough the importance of building trusted friends and colleagues. Like you have some friends that you've been with for years that you really trust. It turns into something like that. And you get to know these people by going to things, going to presentations, going to openings, whatever your field is, engage, get involved, become friends. And after a while, you realize who you can trust, who you can't, and you hang on to those trusted allies, which might be just a small few, but that's really enough. People you can really trust that you like, and they're fun to be with for you. And so it's just, a good thing.
In my research for doing this podcast, that's one of the big points, number of books and articles I've read is that most creatives that are successful financially is birthed out of a community of whether you're in an art community or music community or filmmaking community, whatever medium you're in, that whole idea of the kind of the starving artist out by themselves suffering, that's where the really good art happens. And that's where people kind of make it, if you will. And it seems that that's very few. Would you say that it's more the people that are just the everyday artist that's out there, somewhat pounding the pavement, but they're networking, they're making friends, they're connecting in a larger group, right?
Well, for a visual artist or a writer, you've got to spend a lot of time by yourself. And sometimes, like for me, that's in the middle of the night, because nobody will bother you. But you take Jackson Pollock. Yeah, he lived out on a farm and he painted in this old barn, but he had people over all the time, New York people. They were having parties, they were going in. He was, people were asking him to exhibit his work. The promotion thing was going on, even though he needed that downtime to work on his own. And the people who, the small group of people I've hung out with that paints in their garage, their work stays in the garage. They just don't.
Their walls are big fans.
Yeah. What?
Their walls are big fans. They've seen it all.
Yes. Yeah. And I've known some that don't ever want to show their work at all to anyone. They're too intimidated and shy and fearful that they're going to be judged. And, that is part of being a creative, is throwing yourself out there and you're taking a risk, because it's you and it's what you're making. And so that's something you kind of have to work through and get over. I mean, I get attacks every now and then of insecurity so far as, oh, I can't do this, I'm not good enough. But then I push through and I do it, and I'm totally surprised that it works out, or I'm totally surprised that I got that grant. And it's astounding to, not very many people have 4 Fulbright grants, which is our government grants. And what they do is they send you to foreign countries to make art. You do a project, you do research, you teach. And that's a whole other network I have that's around the world. I mean, I've worked in China and Germany and Bulgaria and where else? Hawaii. I've definitely networked around the United States. Whatever Fulbright asked me to do my first year, I did it, and as a result, they just kept me in the loop. They ended up buying 5 of my large pieces for the Fulbright organization. So they're just ways that would surprise me and appear beyond the money I got for expenses and income for the grants. Plus, I always had this other thing going, as you know. Whenever we were not in our house, I would rent it out. And so we would make even more money. And then I saved it and I invested it.
So getting back into the education, then I want to get into your teaching a little bit too. You went and earned your PhD after all of this. And this is back when I think a lot of that was the earliest knowledge I know of online education. I remember you getting a laptop that was about that thick. An Apple. So if that says the typewriter, I think the laptop was about that thick. You came home with that, and we're like, "What is this? What are you doing?" And so, tell us what you were at Walden University, correct?
Actually, I got that in 1986 at the end of my master's because I wanted to be able to type. And I had joined another organization that was taking me to different parts of the world, like Egypt and the Bahamas and stuff like that. And I wanted to have a computer to carry with me. And so I lugged this, I don't know, it must have weighed, 14 or 15 pounds.
Remember, thing's huge.
But it was the thing. It was the thing after the original little first Mac. And of course, you couldn't haul that around. So I thought, okay, I'm going to invest in this thing. And it was a great investment. But when lighter, equipment started coming out, obviously I dumped that and moved on.
So you went to Walden. What did you get your degree in there?
Design and art history. Yeah. Because I've always had an interest in the history and the background. That started when I was doing graphic design, and I was noticing that the same symbols were being used over and over again. So I started backing up in history, and whoa, I'm going way back, in the medieval and, ancient periods. I was seeing that the same symbols were being used over and over again, and I got it down to a basic 4. And so that was what my master's thesis was about. So it was just a history of graphic design. And I decided to take that farther and with my PhD, and it turned into the social impact of graphic symbolism. And I got a little note from the government asking if this was a topic of social engineering, because the government reads all dissertations for any weird
got the feds
material.
Involved.
So anyway, I was on the screen at that point. And so any point of me trying to hide is, out of the question. They know who I am.
A thing that happens to a lot of creatives as they become more and more experienced, opportunities to share that experience with up and coming creatives, whether it be music or art or whatever, the opportunity to teach. And of course, with a doctorate degree, that opened up a lot of doors for you to teach. Tell us how you kind of got into the teaching aspect of your creative life.
Well, I think just doing presentations, like I got my job at University of Maryland 13 years ago because I was doing a Fulbright presentation in London, England, and the faculty recruiter from the University of Maryland came to my presentation, and she loved my work and what I had to say, and so she offered me a job. And so a number of jobs to teach have just been flukes. They've not flukes, but they've come out of them seeing my work and meeting me and realizing I'm not this insane monster of a creative, and that they could work with me. And like I said, in Fulbright, I was willing to do anything they asked me to do, and that really paid off big time. And I would say that I've probably made more money through them and the associations that went out from them, because once you have a PhD and you're a scholar, a recognized scholar, I mean, things just flood in. It's like for a while in my career, everybody wanted me to teach. And well, I've got a funny story about your younger brother, Joel, is that there was a position at Point Loma, and Joel was going to Point Loma, and he begged me, please don't apply for that job because I know you'll get it. So I didn't.
Point Loma Nazarene University down in San Diego here.
Yes.
Where my brother and I both were able to go to at one time. So, okay, so the education opened up doors. Fulbright opened up all kinds of doors for you to be able to network and travel and teach. And then publishing came into the operation as well. Tell us about that, publishing books.
When I was teaching at UC Irvine in California, I was teaching a lot of graphics. I was responsible for like 14 softwares in multimedia, video, sound, and graphics. And it was really hard work to keep up with that steep of a learning curve. But I did that for 8 years, and it paid well. And I think I helped a lot of students, grew into more things.
I remember the book that you put out that was when
yes.
The internet was coming out, websites at the beginning were just starting to come out, and everybody needed to have a website. It's probably late 90s.
The early 90s is where I entered into the digital world. Actually, it was a little before that, because graphic design and illustration and even painting started to change from handwork to
Photoshop. Right?
Yeah, for me, Photoshop is big time, because Photoshop is the hub for all the other things that, it went into videos, it went into illustration, photography, in every direction you could think of. But the end result was I decided I got an offer from a large publishing company that did academic books. And this was through a relationship of someone else I knew who introduced me. And they said, yes, we'd love you to write a book on creating graphic images for websites with website advice. And this was back in 2000.
Right. You were like one of the first to write a book on optimizing photos for people's websites.
Yeah. And at UCI, that's what got me started. Listservs had just come in, and that was the kind of the foundational bottom of communicating with people and really exchanging on the internet. And so I was teaching classes there that was like one time a week, but students wanted more. They wanted feedback on their artwork. So like I'd have face-to-face class on Tuesday, they wanted me to look at their work. So this listserv opened an opportunity for them to scan at that point and send me, attached to an email, their work. So I'd give them a critique, and they'd have by Thursday to have it finished so they'd be ready for class on Thursday. So that was the beginning. And I opened the listserv to anybody, not just our class. So we had artists, student artists from all over the world join our listserv. And so that was the beginning of internet teaching for me.
We call that like a bulletin board, a digital bulletin
yes,
board
exactly.
today, or now everybody's social media is kind of taking that over, but something where people can share ideas all around the world for the first time in the art community in a way that was just immediate. And that really must have opened doors for you, obviously, to communicate easily around the world with folks.
I love helping students and people. That's why I'm a teacher. For me, in a way, at this point, art is a tool to help the person in their life, because, you know, they come from that struggling place and that, gee, I can't do this, or I'm not good enough, or my parents won't support me in art because they think I will never, you know, make any money and I'll be this loser. It's a thrill to me, a real joy to be able to get a hold of these people. Even people take my classes that are not art majors, they're not creatives, but I make it personal. So art kind of gets a hold of their lives, and they see from the example of these artists who have struggled through and made it through my art history classes, and the light goes on and they think, wow, I could do that. This person started out with less than me. And maybe they were not an ethnic group that was encouraged. Maybe they had no money. I can remember, you know, the band, the Motels, that we played with once. Martha, the lead singer, she was flat broke, but she had a bottle of her husband's shoe polish. And she just started painting on the walls of their house with this brown shoe polish. He was in the military. So that's all she had, but she had to create. And so she just kept going. So I love people, even if they have next to nothing to work with. I mean, if you got a pile of rocks and some dirt and sticks, you can make something, you know?
Sure.
And it's very satisfying.
So you have done so much. It's hard to kind of distill this into a 45-minute program here, but I think a lot of people would like to know what are you doing now? I mean, you've traveled the world, you've done so much, you've taught at multiple universities, you've created art for kings and paupers together, and I know one thing you've always been passionate about, and you can see that in the background there, is reading. You love books. Every time you've moved, you've got like 300 books that Dad's got to haul around. It's kind of funny, but you've absorbed so much, and yet, and now your latest endeavor. Tell us about being a writer. Now you're an author. You've written technical books, but now you're getting into fiction and going a completely new creative way.
I had several years of just this high stress, constantly working. I mean, I imagine you remember that, well, maybe you didn't know, but there were days on end that I wouldn't go to sleep, like 2 or 3 days in a row that I wouldn't sleep at night because I had so much work to do. And it was so demanding. And I was having to continually learn new softwares and upgrades of softwares, because that was a continual thing going on, especially in the 90s. I mean, it was just skyrocketing. So I was getting pretty stressed out, and I was teaching at 3 colleges, you know, either online or face-to-face. Somebody wise came to me and said, if you keep doing this, Gene, you're going to kill yourself. Plus, I was playing in the music group and traveling around back and forth, trying to keep up with that while keeping up classes and trying to do a little creative work for myself. which usually was late at night. So I needed to get back into more of a normalcy. And so, as you know, we moved to Tennessee, and we live in the woods by a river. So it's very relaxing. Recently, in the last few years, my parents passed away. And so I inherited 3 generations of stuff. I mean, old letters. My mother and grandmother and great grandmother were all photographers. And so I have about 20 large albums of photographs, and some of them go back to the 1800s. Photography was created in 1839. And so my great grandma Sarah was taking pictures and reading the old letters. And then I've got pictures on the wall of, like great grandmas hanging on the wall, Grandma Vandora, and just living with their furniture and their artifacts and things that I inherited. I got a bunch of skillets, which is great. I turned it into an exhibit on the wall. It immersed me into our family background. For the first time in my life, I looked back. Before, I was always going forward, never looking back. Well, settling here in a quiet area and time to think, it put me in a place of really, a spiritual growth in a different direction too, that led me to sleepless nights because these characters kept coming up in my head, and I really missed my parents. So I started sketching, a pencil and a piece of paper. That's it. No computer, no, nothing. I decided to start from almost dirt, just from the ground floor. And I'd be laying in bed and these characters kept popping in my head, and there's stories and all the little oral histories and things that I'd read from letters and heard about for years. I mean, I knew one of my great grandmas, so I had information from her. And so I started getting up because I couldn't go to sleep. I'd get up at midnight and I'd work till like 6 a.m. because the characters wouldn't leave me alone. I had to write them down. And so, all to make this long story longer, I started sketching portraits with that. And I realized that it was also a progression of a healing of me from having lost members of our family. And it was cathartic. I stopped crying every day, and the portraits started smiling. They were getting better and better, from crying and grief to other kinds of drawings. So at about 10 drawings, I decided to start writing about the past of our family, but it's fictionalized because I don't want some relative from the Tennessee holler to show up at my door with a gun and go, "Hey, what are you doing?" So I thought about using a pseudonym, but I thought, no, I'll put my name to it. But the sketches and the stories are based on family incidents, but fictionalized for, of course, anonymity, but also to just kind of enhance and flow, make the stories flow and fit together and things, because there's some spotty places in the history. So my latest learning curve digitally is I decided to self-publish. So I put it on Amazon through Kindle as an ebook. As you know, it's a short book. But I thought, I'm going to try a small sample to see if I can do this even. Because I have no editor, I have no feedback from a professional as to, is this writing good? I have no idea. I've never written fiction. are these drawings any good? I hadn't drawn with a pencil and paper maybe for 30 years. And so it was just kind of taking a risk and putting a new part of myself out there that had been completely dormant.
Yeah.
And lo and behold, the book has started selling. So I was encouraged, and so I wrote a second book that's quite a bit longer, much longer, maybe 2-3 times longer. And so I'm going to put that one out next, and I'm on the final edit of that. And then I plan on putting them together as a print book, because a print book has to be a certain size, or Amazon won't, produce it. So that's where I am now. I have ideas of what to do, how to promote it, but that's all still kind of nebulous. I'm still just working on writing the book.
I've always been inspired by you taking that cue of just taking risks. Like you said, a lot of creatives tend to take risks in other ways, maybe on the, with color or pen, or maybe writing a song and adding a certain chord or melody line or rhythm, and that maybe hasn't been done before, or is kind of hasn't been put together in that way. That creativity, putting that into the actually releasing and monetizing what you're doing. I mean, like putting out a work on Amazon, self-publish. I've heard you kind of share a little bit of the story of that. It's not easy. I mean, they say it's easy. It'll take 10 minutes, but it's like, no, that's the longest 10 minutes.
3 easy steps.
Right, right. It's never 3 easy steps.
So I struggled through that, but I made it. It's not maybe as perfect as I'd like it to be. So because a Kindle ebook, you can change the sizes of the fonts, the readers, and so that can throw your whole layout, especially if you have pictures in there all over the place. It'll resize your pictures. It'll, you'll end up with a blank page with nothing on it. And so it's a learning curve, but not difficult or impossible, I think, for most people, which, the amount of people self-publishing is self-evident of that.
Sure.
But
Sure.
It's been fun, and I'm loving doing it. And one thing I wanted to say, we didn't talk about monetization too much beyond the big stuff, but I really caught the bug when I was 9 years old. That was my first income as a creative. And I was in ballet classes since I was 5. And so the owner's business really grew. So by the time I was 9, he needed another teacher. So I got to teach the 5-year-old classes. And so something went on in my head at that point of, creatives can make money. And so that has kind of driven me along in that direction ever since, that, you got to work out the money side. And I will just, I know you're probably getting to this. What would I advise to
I always ask the question, you've got all this experience. What would you say to the 20-year-old Gene Berryhill? If you were to go back in time, be able to give him a little piece of wisdom, what would you say?
Well, again, network, join organizations. When you make some money, save some of it, even if it's a little bit, because it will actually build into something like, say you want to hang a show, an exhibit, but sometimes the artist, the gallery is not always amenable to paying for your framing. So have some money to invest into your art when it's a good investment like that, because you have chances to sell and make money back. I've only done conservative ones so that, maybe I don't make $1 gazillion on it, but I've stuck with them for a long time, and I always get the same check amount. I've invested in things that will be a consistent income for me. When I had the opportunity, like if I saw an inexpensive, maybe property to buy, which happened, in the mountains when we had the cabin, I got that for very little. And that was from my savings that I had built up and put aside. And also the little condo in Hawaii. Well, we had a couple of them. And so I would just rent those out. Plus, we would get to enjoy that, and we'd have the tax write-offs and so on and so forth. I'm not doing that right now, but eventually saved up enough that what you want to do is get to that goal of being debt-free. It's sort of like talking about Dave Ramsey here, but it's really true because now I have complete freedom to invest in and do whatever I want in art rather than being saddled with making art and maybe teaching too much
No, you're not.
to have a good life, And so I can now do this because I've worked to be debt-free, which I am. And so save a little, try to invest in your work. Don't let fear control you. Fear and intimidation, I think, are two of the biggest things that hold people back in the arts. Also, we've known so many artists that are so good, but they don't promote themselves. They don't share what they've got. And as a result, even though they might have less talent, I mean, like if I had less talent, that person with more talent would not have success because they didn't work at it. No. Being an artist is hard work, as you know. I mean, you've really got to keep your skill set going. Yeah. And, you're in music, you've got to keep that skill set going so that when an opportunity does open up, you're ready to go. And I think that's a lot of it, being ready to go when the door opens. Yeah, again, take chances, but don't do some wild, stupid things. Like I've had some offers to do something that felt, I just felt like this sort of little warning inside, don't go there because it's going to be dangerous or it's going to hurt you or something. So I think you've really got to listen to that still small voice inside and listen to it. You're going to make mistakes, learn from them. Don't go down that rabbit hole again when it shows up at your door, because it will. And it might be very enticing, but, discipline yourself to the fact that if that doesn't happen, then something else better is going to happen. And that's always been the case in my life. Go for grants. They're out there. You may not feel qualified, do it. I never dreamed that I'd ever get a Fulbright grant. And when I got it, people were shocked. They said, you got a Fulbright.
Well, that's all the time we have. Thank you so much, Mom. I really appreciate you coming on the show here. And I'm excited for people to hear this story, your story. There's so much more. I know we could have gone on for a few hours on this. It's hard to distill your life. I've seen it firsthand and as your son. And I have to finish with this one little story. It was kind of funny. Well, it really kind of put into perspective you for me as an artist, particularly in the arts world. I mean, kids, when they see their parents, it's kind of like, yeah, my mom's an artist, my dad's a teacher, whatever, musician, this and that. And I never really knew to extent what kind of impact you had in the world, because you've traveled. I don't talk to those people that I'm not in those networking groups. I didn't go to China with you, kind of thing. I mean, I've been a lot of places with you, but I didn't really know your art acumen, if you will, until you had taught at Biola for 20-25 years, Biola University in LA area. And it's a pretty major Christian university there. And you were in the art department there. And my friend Kevin Prince, you remember Kevin.
Sure.
He ended up earning his degree from Biola many years after you'd already graduated, or stopped teaching there. But maybe you were teaching online. I think you were teaching online. Anyway, we're standing in line to get into Kevin's graduation ceremony, and there were people standing right in front of us in line. And this one guy was talking kind of loud, and I couldn't help but overhear. And he started talking about this class that he took in art at Biola and how interesting it was. And it like changed his life. And he goes, yeah, the instructor was Gene Berryhill. I about lost it right there. I'm like, what? I'm like, I go over to the guy, I'm all, dude, did you just say Gene Berryhill like changed your life? He's like, yeah, do you know her? I'm like, oh yeah, I've met her a couple times. My mom. And he goes, no way, it's your mother. You were like a total rock star in his mind. So for me, I kids, we're all, we think our parents, whatever, kind of got their own little boring life, and it's like, wait a second. Yeah, that was really a moment where I saw this person was very passionate. This guy was probably in his, I want to say his 20s, 30s, pretty young, and he was really deeply moved by your influence in his life. So for me to see that kind of come full circle and just randomly being in line at a graduation ceremony was pretty cool. So, Mom, thank you so much. And what's a website they can go to?
It's just geneberryhill.com. And my name's spelled Gene.
Berryhill, same last name.
Just like yours.
Yeah. And also they can just look up Gene Berryhill on Amazon in the book section. You've got a number of books, and the new book is there, which I've read, and it's great. Honestly, your writing style is very easy to read, but yet intelligent and very, very descriptive. And I enjoyed your voice in pen.
Thank you.
Very nice. So
what you can do is just type my name into the search field, and all kinds of things will come up of
Google me. That's what they say.
Where I've been, what I've done, my presentations. I noticed somebody has posted them on it. I mean, people just grab stuff off of my website and other people's websites, and they just stick them on the internet without me knowing about it. So there's a bunch of stuff there.
You're a bass player now too. Sorry, we don't have a lot of time here, but I was looking on back of my wall, that album right there. You played bass on the Surfaris Wipeout album. And here's a picture of her right there playing. That's me, my brother, and there's my dad. We have a family band. We all played together, and we're still friends. It's amazing how that all works.
That is amazing. So many people have asked me, how do you guys do this? And probably the answer is most of the time very carefully these days. Yes. Because being a family and being colleagues and work partners, we've had a lot of things to work through, but we've learned a lot. I think we've grown closer, and we still all talk to each other. A lot of bands don't do that. So it's been a highlight experience of my life.
Well, we'll have to get the other half of your family at top with Dad. We'll get him on the show here sometime soon. But appreciate your time here on Creatives Who Thrive. And we'll be talking to everybody next time.